My name is Abigail, and at 28, I never expected to discover that I was bankrolling my entire family's lifestyle. Despite being the youngest, I was always the responsible one, the achiever, the provider. My mother raised me believing family comes first, that I owed everything to them. When I finally confronted her about secretly paying $9,300 monthly for our family expenses, her response cut deeper than any knife. If you don't like living with family, you can leave. Where are you watching from? Today? Have you ever discovered someone you love was taking advantage of your generosity? If so, hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you think blood really is thicker than water. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Springfield, Massachusetts, our family seemed normal from the outside. Our modest two-story colonial home with its small but well-maintained yard represented the American dream my parents had worked hard to achieve after immigrating from Ireland as young adults. Our family consisted of my mother Diana, my father Patrick, my older brother Ryan, who is now 32, and my sister Megan, who is 30. As the youngest by 2 years, I often found myself looking up to my siblings, eager to earn their approval and my parents' praise. My childhood memories are filled with weekend barbecues, holiday gatherings, and the warm glow of family togetherness. My father worked as an engineer at a local manufacturing plant, while my mother managed a small boutique downtown. They both emphasized the importance of education, hard work, and family loyalty above all else. Everything changed when I turned 12. My father suffered a sudden heart attack at work and passed away within hours. The shock rippled through our family like an earthquake, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. Not only did we lose the emotional cornerstone of our family, but we also lost our primary financial provider. The life insurance policy my father had wasn't substantial enough to maintain our lifestyle long term. In the months following his death, I watched my mother transform. The warm, laughing woman who had baked cookies and read bedtime stories became increasingly anxious, bitter and controlling, particularly about money. Every purchase required justification. Every bill became a source of visible stress. She would sit at the kitchen table late into the night, calculator in hand, shoulders hunched over stacks of papers. "Family has to stick together now," became her mantra. "We only have each other." I responded to the family crisis in the only way my 12-year-old self knew how, by trying to be perfect. While my siblings reacted to our father's death with rebellion and withdrawal, I threw myself into school with newfound determination. I stayed up late studying, joined academic clubs, and began to show a natural aptitude for mathematics and finance that my teachers quickly noticed. "Your daughter has a gift with numbers," my 8th grade math teacher told my mother during a parent-teacher conference. "She should consider a career in finance." That casual comment planted a seed that would grow to define my future. By 16, I had already mapped out my academic path: top grades in high school, a scholarship to a prestigious university, and a career in financial management. I studied finance textbooks in my free time, fascinated by the logic and strategy behind money management. During my junior year of high school, I applied for every scholarship I could find, writing countless essays and gathering recommendation letters. The work paid off when I received a substantial merit scholarship to Bentley University, known for its excellent business programs. My mother's reaction wasn't what I expected. "That's so far away," she said, frowning at the acceptance letter. "And scholarships never cover everything. We can't afford all those hidden costs." Still, she couldn't argue with the financial logic, and I enrolled at Bentley with a mixture of excitement and guilt. The guilt only intensified when I called home during my freshman year and frequently heard about financial struggles. Without telling me, my brother had dropped out of community college and was working sporadically at retail jobs. My sister had enrolled in a costly private university but was changing majors every semester, extending her time in school. I took on multiple jobs during college, working in the campus library, tutoring other students in finance and accounting, and even doing tax preparation seasonally. Every extra dollar I earned went back home to help out, as my mother put it. I would transfer money to her account, never asking for details about where it went, trusting that it was necessary for our family's stability. Despite working 20 to 30 hours weekly, I maintained a 4.0 GPA and graduated summa cum laude. Campus recruiters took notice, and I received multiple job offers before graduation. I accepted a position at a prestigious financial firm in Boston with a starting salary that made my eyes widen. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I could breathe financially. The logical next step would have been to find an apartment in Boston, near my new office. Several of my classmates were looking for roommates, and the thought of starting fresh in the city excited me. But when I called my mother with the good news about my job, her response was immediate. "So you'll be moving back home, right? The commute to Boston isn't too bad, and think of all the money you'll save on rent." I hesitated. I was thinking of getting a place in the city. "Abigail." My mother sighed, her voice taking on the tone that always made me feel selfish. "Your brother just lost his job again, and Megan's tuition just increased. I don't know how we're going to manage this month, but do what you want, of course." And just like that, my plans changed. I told myself it would be temporary, just until I had saved enough for a solid emergency fund and helped my family get back on their feet. I told myself that commuting 90 minutes each way was a small sacrifice to make for the people who had raised me. I told myself that family comes first, always. I moved back into my childhood bedroom the weekend after graduation, arranging my college textbooks and professional wardrobe in the same space that still held my high school trophies and childhood stuffed animals. It felt like stepping backward, but I convinced myself it was actually a strategic financial move. "You're so good with money, Abby," my mother said as she helped me unpack. "This family would be lost without you." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. My first day at Lambert Financial Advisors in downtown Boston arrived with both excitement and exhaustion. After waking at 5:30 in the morning to make the lengthy commute, I arrived at the gleaming office building feeling like an imposter, in my new business attire. But by the end of that first day, my supervisor had already complimented my analysis of a client portfolio, and I felt a surge of confidence that maybe, just maybe, I truly belonged in this world. That evening, as I sat with my mother at our kitchen table, she broached the subject I had been expecting. "Now that you're earning a real salary," she said, sliding a handwritten list across the table, "we should discuss your contribution to the household." The list detailed monthly expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, and various other costs. The total at the bottom was divided by 4. "This would be your fair share," my mother explained. "Since there are 4 of us in the house." The amount seemed reasonable, even generous considering the location and size of our home compared to Boston apartment prices. I agreed without hesitation, actually feeling grateful that I could help ease my mother's financial burden after all. She had sacrificed for us. "I can transfer the money to your account each month," I offered. "Would the first of the month work?" My mother nodded, looking relieved. "That would be perfect. And maybe we could round it up a bit, just to cover unexpected expenses. You know how things always come up." Again I agreed. It seemed like the least I could do. "And it would be easier if I just continued handling all the bills," she added. "No sense in complicating things by splitting them up. I already have all the accounts set up." That decision, allowing my mother to manage all household expenses, while I simply transferred money to her, would prove to be my first critical mistake. But at 22, flushed with my first professional job and eager to prove my adulthood and responsibility, I didn't question the arrangement. Within 2 months I had settled into a routine. Weekdays meant early mornings, long commutes, intense work hours and late returns home. Weekends were for recovering, helping around the house and occasionally meeting up with the few high school friends who remained in the area. Most of my college friends had scattered across the country for jobs or graduate school, our communication dwindling to occasional text messages and social media likes. 3 months into this arrangement, my mother approached me with a concerned expression. "The property taxes went up," she explained, "and the water heater needed repairs. Would you mind increasing your contribution a bit this month?" Of course I didn't mind, and I didn't mind the next month when the car insurance increased, or the following month when Ryan needed emergency dental work. The increases were always presented as temporary, exceptional circumstances, but they never seemed to decrease again afterward. By the 6-month mark at my job, I received my first performance review and a modest raise. That same evening, my mother mentioned that Megan had maxed out her credit card buying textbooks and needed help with the payments. Just until she finishes school, my mother assured me. You know how important education is. A pattern was establishing itself, so subtle I barely noticed its formation. My financial responsibilities at home increased in perfect tandem with every salary increase I received. When I was promoted to junior analyst at the 9-month mark with another salary bump, my monthly family contribution somehow expanded to include my brother's car payment. He needs reliable transportation to job interviews, my mother explained when I questioned this expense. You want him to be self-sufficient eventually, don't you? The way she framed these requests always made refusal seem selfish or short-sighted. How could I argue against helping my brother find employment? How could I prioritize my own comfort over my sister's education? What kind of daughter would refuse to help her widowed mother maintain the family home? Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. My natural aptitude for financial analysis, combined with my willingness to work long hours and take on additional projects, made me a rising star at Lambert Financial. By the end of my first year, I had been assigned several high-value clients who specifically requested me for their portfolio management. My success at work became a strange source of stress at home. Every promotion or bonus announcement was met with congratulations, quickly followed by new financial needs from my family. Ryan's car broke down and needed replacing. Megan decided to pursue a master's degree. The house needed a new roof. I began taking on additional clients for extra commissions, working evenings and weekends to meet the growing financial demands. The irony wasn't lost on me. As a financial advisor helping wealthy clients optimize their investments and minimize unnecessary expenses, I had no clear idea where my own money was going beyond the ever-increasing sum I transferred to my mother's account each month. 2 years into this arrangement, exhaustion had become my constant companion. Dark circles took up permanent residence under my eyes. My once vibrant social life had withered to occasional drinks with co-workers, and even those outings were often cut short by my need to catch the last commuter train home. You should take better care of yourself, my friend Taylor remarked during a rare lunch meet-up. You look tired, Abby. Just busy with work, I replied automatically. Still living at home? She asked, stirring her coffee. I nodded. It makes financial sense. Taylor gave me a skeptical look but didn't press further. The truth was, I wasn't sure it did make financial sense anymore. The amount I now transferred to my mother each month could have covered a luxury apartment in downtown Boston, eliminating my grueling commute and giving me back precious hours each day. But every time I considered moving out, guilt stopped me. Cold. My family needed me. My mother reminded me of this fact regularly. By my 3rd year at Lambert Financial, I had been promoted to senior analyst with a significant salary increase. I now managed a portfolio of high-net-worth clients and had developed a reputation for conservative but consistently successful investment strategies. My professional life was everything I had dreamed of during those late nights studying in college. My personal life, however, was virtually non-existent. Dating seemed impossible with my schedule and living situation. Friends had stopped inviting me to events, knowing I would likely cancel at the last minute due to work or family obligations. My health was suffering from stress and lack of sleep, and I had started experiencing anxiety attacks that left me gasping for breath in bathroom stalls at work. Still, I told myself this was temporary, just until Ryan found stable employment, just until Megan finished her master's program, just until things settled down, just until. I didn't realize I had become a prisoner of those 2 words until the day everything changed. The revelation that would ultimately transform my life began innocuously, with a casual conversation in the break room at work. I was microwaving my lunch when Jordan, a colleague from the tax division, mentioned his recent move to a new apartment. The rent is killing me, he groaned, stirring his coffee. $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom in Cambridge. That sounds about right for the area, I replied, thinking of the clients whose financial profiles I managed. Yeah, but with utilities, And parking. I'm looking at nearly $3,000 total. How much are you paying in Boston? Oh, I still live at home, I admitted, feeling that familiar flush of embarrassment. At 28, most of my peers had their own places. I help with expenses there, Jordan nodded. Smart move, probably saving a fortune. I don't know about that, I said with a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. Family comes. With its own costs. How much do you contribute? If you don't mind me asking, Jordan added quickly. I'm just trying to figure out if I'm getting robbed by my landlord. I hesitated, then gave him the rounded figure I transferred to my mother each month. Jordan's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. $9,000 per month. His voice rose in disbelief. For a family home in Springfield? Are you paying for a mansion? His reaction startled me. No, it's just a regular house, but there are other expenses too. My siblings... Abby, Jordan interrupted, his expression serious. I do tax planning for a living. Unless your family home is a 30-room estate with staff, something doesn't add up. He probably meant well, but his words lodged in my mind like splinters. That night, on the train ride home, I found myself doing mental calculations. How much was our mortgage, actually? What were typical utility costs for a house our size? How much could my siblings possibly need for their expenses? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to really question the financial arrangement that had become my normal. The more I thought about it, the more Jordan's shocked reaction seemed justified. I was transferring the equivalent of a luxury car payment to my mother every month, with only the vaguest understanding of where that money went. 2 days later, an opportunity presented itself. My mother mentioned she would be visiting my aunt in New Hampshire for the weekend. My siblings both had plans as well. Ryan with his latest girlfriend, and Megan at a conference for her master's program. I would have the house to myself, a rare occurrence. As soon as they had all left on Friday evening, I went to my mother's home office. The small room adjacent to her bedroom had always been off limits, her private space for handling adult matters, as she had put it when we were children. The prohibition had carried into our adulthood through unspoken agreement. I felt like an intruder as I opened the door, half expecting alarms to sound. Instead, I found a meticulously organised room with a desk, filing cabinets and bookshelves. Everything labelled, everything in its place, my mother's personality reflected perfectly in this ordered space. The filing cabinet yielded its secrets easily. My mother had always been methodical about record-keeping, a trait I had inherited. Folders were labelled by year and category: mortgage, utilities, insurance, medical, education, automotive, and more. I pulled out the current year's folders and began to review their contents at the desk. What I discovered over the next few hours left me physically ill. The mortgage payment on our house was $2,400 per month, a substantial sum, but nowhere near what I had imagined based on my contributions. Utilities averaged around $500 monthly. These core household expenses totaled roughly $3,000, or $750 per person, if divided equally among 4 residents. But that wasn't all. I found statements for 3, credit cards in my mother's name with balances near their limits. The purchases were for clothing, jewellery, spa treatments, and expensive restaurants, places I knew my mother frequented, but had assumed she could afford on her boutique manager's salary. In the automotive folder, I found loan documents for not just Ryan's car, but a new luxury sedan my mother had purchased 6 months earlier, a vehicle she had told me was a special lease through the boutique. Both car payments totaled over $1,500 monthly. The education folder revealed that Megan's tuition was indeed expensive, but she had qualified for substantial grants that covered nearly 70% of the cost. The remaining balance was far less than what my mother had claimed when asking for my help. Most shocking of all was a folder labelled Savings that contained statements for an account I had never known existed. My mother had been depositing money regularly, large sums that could only have come from my contributions, into this account for years. The current balance was over $100,000. My hands trembled as I carefully returned everything to its proper place. My mind struggled to process what I had discovered. For 3 years, I had been financing not just reasonable family expenses, but my mother's luxury purchases, my brother's irresponsibility, my sister's exaggerated needs, and a secret savings account that would have funded my own down payment on a home several times over. The betrayal cut deep on multiple levels. Not just the financial exploitation, but the elaborate deception behind it. The realization that my family, the people I had sacrificed everything for, had been taking advantage of me deliberately and systematically. I returned to my bedroom and methodically calculated exactly how much I had been contributing to the household over the past 3 years, comparing it with the actual expenses I had just uncovered. The discrepancy was staggering. Of the approximately $9,300 I transferred monthly, less than a third went to legitimate shared expenses. The rest had been funding my family's lifestyle upgrades, debt, and my mother's secret nest egg. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by my window watching the neighborhood I had grown up in, a place that suddenly felt alien and hostile. The family photos on my dresser seemed to mock me now, smiling faces hiding calculation and deceit. By morning, one thing was clear. I could no longer live in ignorance. I had to confront my family with what I knew, regardless of the consequences. I spent Saturday preparing myself, organizing my findings, and steeling my resolve. Sunday, when everyone returned, would be the day of reckoning. Sunday evening arrived with the familiar sounds of my family returning home. Car doors slamming, footsteps on the porch, keys jingling in the lock. I had spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm and factual despite the emotional turmoil inside me. I had prepared a simple dinner, nothing special, just pasta and salad, and set the dining room table, something we rarely did anymore since everyone usually ate at different times due to varying schedules. When my mother entered the kitchen and saw the table set, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "What's the occasion?" she asked, setting down her overnight bag. "I thought it would be nice for us all to eat together," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Could you let Ryan and Megan know dinner's ready when they get in?" My mother looked at me curiously but nodded. Within 20 minutes, the 4 of us were seated around the table that had been the centre of family meals throughout my childhood. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal, given what I knew and what I was about to do. We made small talk through the first part of the meal. My mother described her visit with my aunt. Ryan mentioned a promising job lead. Megan talked about her conference. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, waiting for the right moment. It came when my mother mentioned an upcoming family vacation she was planning to Florida. "It will be good for all of us to get away together," she said. "I've already put deposits down on a beachfront condo." "That sounds expensive," I remarked casually. "How are we paying for that?" A brief silence fell over the table. My mother glanced at my siblings before answering. "We've been saving up," she said vaguely. "Family vacations are important." "When you say we've been saving," I continued, setting down my fork, "what exactly do you mean?" My mother's expression hardened slightly. "Abigail, if you're concerned about money, you don't have to come. Though I would think with your salary, a family vacation wouldn't be such a stretch." "My salary?" I repeated. "Let's talk about my salary, Mum." Ryan and Megan exchanged glances. My mother's posture stiffened. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss," she said. "How about we discuss where my money has been going for the past 3 years?" I suggested, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "How about we discuss the fact that I've been paying $9,300 monthly to this household?" My mother's face remained impassive, but a slight flush crept up her neck. "You've been contributing your fair share to family expenses, yes." "My fair share," I echoed. "Would you like to know what I discovered that fair share has actually been paying for?" I reached beside my chair and pulled up a folder I had prepared with copies of the documents I had found. I placed it on the table and opened it. "Our mortgage is $2,400 a month," I began, laying out the statement. "Utilities average about $500. That's a total of $2,900 for core household expenses. Divided by 4 people, that's $725 per person. My siblings were looking increasingly uncomfortable. My mother's lips had formed a thin line. Then there's the 2 car payments, I continued, placing those statements on the table. Ryan's pickup truck at $650 monthly, and Mum your new Audi at $895, neither of which I drive or benefit from. Abby, Ryan started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. There's also the 3 credit cards with combined monthly payments of over $2,000 for clothes, restaurants, and spa treatments. I laid those statements down. And Megan's tuition, which after grants, comes to about $1,500 per month, not the $3,000 I was told. My sister's eyes widened. Mum told me you wanted to help with the full amount. She said quietly, that you insisted. And then there's this, I said, placing the savings account statement on top of the pile. $106,000 in a savings account I knew nothing about, built with my money. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at the documents, her expression unreadable. Ryan looked at his plate. Megan had tears forming in her eyes. You went through my private papers, my mother finally said, her voice cold. Yes, I admitted without apology. After 3 years of being lied to, I needed the truth. We're family, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Family takes care of each other. Is that what this is? I gestured to the papers. Taking care, or is it taking advantage? You make more than the rest of us combined, Ryan interjected defensively. Mum said you were happy to help out. Help out, yes. Bankroll your new truck while you work part-time. Pay for Mum's luxury car and shopping sprees. Finance a secret savings account. That's not helping out, that's being exploited. You've always been so dramatic, Abigail. My mother sighed, shaking her head. This is what families do. They share resources. Share. I felt my carefully maintained composure slipping. When have any of you shared with me? When have you contributed? Anything close to what I have? When have you even been honest about where my money was going? You never asked, my mother replied coldly, because I trusted you. The words burst from me louder than I intended. I trusted all of you. Lower your voice, my mother commanded, the same tone she had used when I was a child. This behaviour is inappropriate. Inappropriate. I nearly laughed. What's inappropriate is stealing from your own daughter. What's inappropriate is lying to my face for years while draining my bank account. No one stole from you, my mother insisted. You agreed to contribute to this household. Under false pretences, you told me it was for necessary expenses, not luxury cars and secret savings accounts. Ryan stood up suddenly. I need to go, he muttered, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Sit down, I said firmly. We're all going to have this conversation. To my surprise, he sat. Perhaps he saw something in my expression that told him I wouldn't back down this time. What do you want, Abigail? My mother asked, her voice tired. Now. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry we didn't give you an itemized receipt for every expense. I want accountability, I replied. I want to know why my own family would do this to me. I want my money back, and I want a complete change in this arrangement going forward. Your money back? My mother actually laughed. After everything I've done for you, after raising you, feeding you, clothing you, supporting your education, you think you don't owe anything for that? I paid for my own education with scholarships and jobs, I reminded her. And children don't owe their parents for raising them. That was your choice and your responsibility. My mother's face hardened into an expression I rarely saw, pure cold anger. Well, clearly you've made up your mind about your family, she said. So what now? You're going to punish us all because you suddenly decided you're being treated unfairly. I'm going to stop the financial exploitation, I said simply, starting immediately. And how do you propose we pay the mortgage, the utilities, your brothers' and sisters' needs? The same way other adults do, I replied, with jobs and budgets and reasonable expectations. My mother stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a scrape that made me flinch. "If you don't like living with family, Abigail, you can leave," she said, her voice like ice. "We managed before you and your money, and we'll manage after." The words hit me like a physical blow. After years of sacrifice, after giving nearly 70% of my income to support them, this was their response. Not remorse, not understanding, but a cold dismissal. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Is that really how you feel? All of you?" I looked at my siblings. Megan looked conflicted, but remained silent. Ryan shrugged uncomfortably. "Mom handles the money," he muttered. "I just assumed you knew what was happening." "Well," I said, standing up myself, "now I do know, and things are going to change." I gathered the documents with shaking hands and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard my mother say something to my siblings in a low voice, but I didn't turn around. I grabbed my purse and car keys and left the house without another word. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, tears blurring my vision. Eventually, I found myself outside Taylor's apartment building. I hadn't called or texted, but I knew she was my only real friend left in the area. When she opened her door and saw my tear-streaked face, she immediately pulled me into a hug. "What happened?" she asked, leading me to her couch. Through sobs and starts, I told her everything. The years of financial drain, the discovery of where my money had really been going, the confrontation, and my mother's cold ultimatum. Taylor listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Abby," she said gently but firmly, "what they've been doing to you is financial abuse. It's not normal, and it's not okay." "But they're my family," I whispered. "Family doesn't treat each other this way," she insisted. "Real family supports each other, not drains each other dry." As Taylor made up her guest room for me to spend the night, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and relief. The family. I had sacrificed everything for had shown their true colours. The pain was immense, but there was also a glimmer of something else, the possibility of freedom. I returned home the next morning to gather clothes for work, half expecting the locks to be changed. Instead, I found the house silent and empty. Everyone had already left for the day. A note on the kitchen counter in my mother's precise handwriting read simply, "We should talk when everyone calms down." The familiar handwriting, the reasonable tone, the implication that I was the one who needed to calm down, it was all so typical of how conflicts had been managed in our family. Problems weren't resolved. They were smoothed over, buried, forgotten until the next eruption. Not this time. I went to work with an overnight bag and performed my duties mechanically, my mind elsewhere. During my lunch break, I called a real estate agent recommended by one of my clients and arranged to view apartments in Boston that evening. After work, I toured 3 places within walking distance of my office, eventually putting down a deposit, on a 1-bedroom unit in a secure building with a fitness centre and rooftop terrace. The rent was less than a third of what I had been paying my family. The apartment wouldn't be available for 2 weeks, which meant I needed temporary accommodation. Taylor offered her guest room for as long as necessary, an act of friendship that brought me to tears all over again. When I returned home that night to pack more of my belongings, my entire family was waiting in the living room. The scene reminded me of interventions from television shows, the concerned faces, the careful positioning, the tension in the air. "We need to talk," my mother began, her voice conciliatory. "Yes, we do," I agreed, remaining standing while they all sat. "I've put a deposit on an apartment in Boston. I'll be moving out as soon as it's ready. In the meantime, I'll be staying with a friend." My announcement clearly wasn't what they had expected. My mother's expression flickered between surprise and calculation. "Abigail, I think you're overreacting," she said. "Families have disagreements. That doesn't mean you run away." "I'm not running away," I corrected her. "I'm making a healthy decision for myself. I will no longer be contributing to household expenses beyond my equal share for the time I remain here. That comes to $725, which I will pay directly to the mortgage company. Ryan leaned forward, his expression anxious. But what about my truck payment? It's due next week. That's your responsibility, I said simply. You're 32 years old, Ryan. It's time you paid for your own vehicle. But I can't afford it on what I make, he protested. Then you should have bought a less expensive vehicle, I replied, unmoved. Or found a better paying job before taking on that debt. This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude I was talking about, my mother interjected. Family helps family through rough patches. 3 years is not a rough patch, I pointed out. It's a lifestyle choice, one that's been funded by me without my informed consent. Megan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I didn't know, Abby. About the extra money Mum said you were paying for my tuition. I would never have agreed to that. My mother shot her a warning look, but Megan continued. I can get a part-time job to cover the actual amount. You shouldn't have to pay for my education. For the first time since the confrontation began, I felt a small softening. At least one family member seemed to understand the fundamental unfairness of the situation. Thank you, Megan, I said. I appreciate that. So that's it? My mother demanded. You're just walking away from your family responsibilities? My responsibility is to myself right now, I replied. Something I've neglected for too long. The next 2 weeks were among the most difficult of my life. The atmosphere at home oscillated between icy silence and emotional manipulation. My mother alternated between guilt trips. After all I've sacrificed for you. Dire predictions. You'll regret abandoning your family when you need us. And occasional desperate bargaining. What if you just covered the mortgage and Ryan's car? Meanwhile, extended family members began calling and texting. My mother had apparently shared her version of events, that I had suddenly refused to help the family financially despite my excessive income and was abandoning them to potential homelessness. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I rarely spoke with suddenly had strong opinions about my selfishness and lack of family loyalty. I didn't bother defending myself to most of them. The few who seemed genuinely concerned rather than judgmental received a brief explanation that the financial arrangement had become unsustainable and inequitable. Some understood, others didn't. I discovered that I cared less about their opinions than I would have expected. At work, I threw myself into my clients' financial matters with renewed focus, perhaps compensating for my failure to manage my own. I scheduled meetings with a financial advisor, unaffiliated with my firm, to help me reorganize my finances and create a budget that prioritized my needs and goals. For the first time, I began to see my income as truly mine, not a family resource to be tapped at will. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in family dynamics. During our sessions, I began to recognize patterns that had been present long before the financial exploitation began. What you're describing sounds like a form of parentification, Dr. Winters explained during one session. You were assigned adult responsibilities from a young age, particularly after your father's death. You became the emotional and financial caretaker for the family, reversing the natural parent-child relationship. But I wanted to help, I protested weakly. Wanting to help is natural and healthy, she agreed. Being manipulated into sacrificing your own well-being and future is not. There's a difference between contributing to a family and being exploited by one. These conversations were painful, but illuminating. I began to see how my mother's grief after my father's death had transformed into a sense of entitlement to financial support, how my siblings had been encouraged to depend on me rather than develop their own independence, and how I had been conditioned to equate self-sacrifice with love and worthiness. As my moving date approached, the pressure from my family intensified. My mother made one last dramatic attempt to change my mind, inviting my aunt and uncle over for dinner without warning me. They arrived just as I was packing boxes in my room. We're just concerned about your mother and siblings, my aunt explained as we sat awkwardly in the living room. Family has to stick together through hard times. I agree, I said calmly, but enabling financial irresponsibility isn't helping anyone in the long run. Your mother is getting older, my uncle argued. She can't work forever. Don't you think you owe her some security? I believe in helping my mother, I replied, but not at the expense of my own financial security and not through deception. There are reasonable ways we could have arranged family support that didn't involve lying to me about where my money was going. The conversation went in circles until I finally excused myself to continue packing. Later, I overheard my mother sobbing dramatically in the kitchen, telling my aunt, "I just don't know what we'll do without her support. We might lose the house." The manipulation was so transparent now that I could recognise it. The house payment was well within what my mother could afford on her manager's salary if she adjusted her spending habits. The financial crisis she was projecting was entirely of her own making and designed to pull me back into the role of family provider. The day before my move, my brother came to my room while I was taping up the last of my boxes. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "So you're really doing this?" he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yes, Ryan, I really am." He sighed heavily. "Look, I know things got messed up, but couldn't you just keep helping out with my truck until I find a better job? Just a few more months?" I stopped packing and looked at him directly. "No." The simple refusal seemed to startle him. He had clearly expected negotiation, bargaining, the same pattern we had followed for years. "But it's not my fault, the job." "Market sucks," he protested. "It's not about fault," I explained. "It's about responsibility. Your truck payment is your responsibility, not mine." "So that's it? You just don't care what happens to me?" His voice had taken on the wounded tone that had worked on me so many times before. "I care about you, Ryan, but caring doesn't mean I have to pay your bills." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I continued packing, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and resolve. The guilt was old, familiar, the voice that said I was selfish for prioritizing myself. The resolve was newer but growing stronger, the voice that said I deserved a life of my own. The next morning, I loaded the last of my belongings into my car. My mother and siblings stood on the porch, watching silently. No hugs, no well wishes, just silent reproach in their postures and expressions. As I pulled away from the house where I had spent most of my life, tears streamed down my face. Not because I was making the wrong choice, but because the right choice hurt so much. I was leaving behind not just my family, but the identity I had constructed around being their support system, their safety net, their financial saviour. Who was I, if not the responsible one, the provider, the perfect daughter who sacrificed everything for her family's well-being? It was time to find out. My new apartment in Boston initially felt more like a hotel room than a home, unfamiliar, impersonal, and slightly intimidating in its emptiness. The first night I sat on the floor eating takeout, surrounded by boxes and bare walls, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. The silence was profound after years of living with family noises, my mother's television shows, Ryan's music, Megan's phone conversations. But there was also a peace to that silence, an absence of tension I hadn't realised I had been carrying, until it was gone. I slept better that first night than I had in years, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and air mattress that served as my temporary bed. The next morning, I woke without an alarm, naturally roused by sunlight streaming through blinds I had forgotten to close. The realisation that I didn't have to make the 90-minute commute to work hit me like a physical sensation, a weight lifting from my chest. I could walk to the office in 15 minutes. The 2 extra hours in my day felt like an extravagant gift. That first week was a blur of practical tasks, unpacking boxes, assembling furniture delivered from IKEA, setting up utilities in my name, changing my address on accounts and documents. Mundane activities that nonetheless represented my independence and autonomy. Financial adjustments came next. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution, redirected my direct deposit, and systematically changed all my automatic payments to ensure my mother had no access to my finances. With the guidance of my financial advisor, I created a realistic budget that included not just necessities, but also savings goals, retirement contributions, and, most revolutionary of all, funds for personal enjoyment. Your expenses have dropped by over $7,000 monthly, my advisor noted during our review meeting. That's a life-changing difference. It was indeed life-changing to see my income as my own resource rather than a family fund. For the first time, I began to consider possibilities that had seemed unattainable before: home ownership, international travel, advanced degrees, early retirement. The financial freedom was exhilarating and slightly terrifying in its expansiveness. Meanwhile, the fallout from my departure continued. My mother called daily at first, her messages oscillating between anger. How could you abandon us like this? Manipulation. Ryan might lose his truck and it will be your fault. And occasional attempts at reconciliation that always circled back to financial requests. I established boundaries I had never before attempted, letting most calls go to voicemail, and responding with brief factual texts. When I did speak with her, I steered conversations away from money and toward neutral topics. If she persisted with financial discussions, I ended the call politely but firmly. It was uncomfortable and contrary to decades of conditioning, but necessary for my healing. My siblings' responses differed markedly. Ryan's communication consisted mainly of texts asking for loans or complaining about financial hardships. I maintained my position, offering to help him create a budget or find better employment, but not providing direct financial assistance. His messages gradually decreased in frequency as he realized the Bank of Abigail was permanently closed. Megan surprised me. 3 weeks after my move, she asked if we could meet for coffee. We met at a cafe halfway between Boston and Springfield, both slightly nervous in this new dynamic. "I'm sorry," she said after we had exchanged awkward pleasantries. "I should have noticed what was happening. I should have questioned it." Her apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, brought tears to my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about our family patterns," she continued. "How Mom always made you the responsible one and me the baby who needed taking care of. It wasn't fair to either of us." We talked for hours that day, really talked as adults rather than as roles in a dysfunctional family system. Megan shared that she had found a part-time job to cover her remaining tuition and was considering staying in Boston after graduation rather than moving back home. "I need to learn how to be independent," she said. "Like you." Her words touched me deeply. Perhaps some good would come from this painful separation after all. As weeks turned into months, I began to build a life that felt authentically mine. I joined a running group that met Saturday mornings in Boston Common, finding unexpected joy in physical activity and casual friendships unconnected to work or family. I signed up for a photography class I had always been interested in, but never had time for during my commuting years. I redecorated my apartment with colours and styles I loved, without considering anyone else's preferences. Small pleasures became significant markers of my new independence. Buying fresh flowers just because they made me happy, sleeping in on Sundays without guilt, cooking elaborate meals for myself rather than rushing through drive-thrus between obligations. I discovered parts of myself that had been submerged beneath family responsibilities. A love of jazz music, an interest in documentary films, a preference for spicy foods my family had never enjoyed. Not everything was smooth sailing. The first family emergency came about 2 months after my move. My mother called on a Tuesday evening, her voice strained with what seemed like genuine distress. "The furnace died," she explained. "The repair company wants $4,000 for a replacement. We don't have it, Abby. It's going to be below freezing this weekend." My immediate instinct was to offer the money, to solve the problem as I always had. But Dr. Winter's voice echoed in my mind from our most recent therapy session. "Consider whether you're responding out of healthy love or unhealthy guilt and obligation." "That sounds like a difficult situation," I said carefully. "Have you called the bank about a home equity loan? Or checked if the repair company offers financing?" My mother's tone changed immediately. "I can't believe you're suggesting I go into debt when you have plenty of money sitting in your account. This is your family home too, Abigail." "I'm sorry you're dealing with this stress," I replied, maintaining my calm. "But there are financial options available that don't involve me paying for it directly." She hung up without another word. I sat with the discomfort of her disappointment and anger, resisting the urge to call back and give in. The next day, Megan texted to let me know our mother had managed to get financing through the repair company. The furnace was being replaced. The world hadn't ended because I said no. Each small boundary maintained, each instance of prioritizing my needs, built my confidence in this new way of living. I began to recognize that true generosity comes from choice rather than coercion or manipulation, and that I could still be a loving daughter and sister without being a financial crutch. Dating entered my life again, something that had been practically impossible in my previous situation. Through a colleague's introduction, I met Michael, a landscape architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence I found attractive. Our first date extended from dinner to a long walk along the harbour, to coffee at a late-night cafe, conversation flowing effortlessly. On our third date, when the subject of family arose, I shared an abbreviated version of my recent experience. I watched his face carefully, half expecting judgment or incomprehension. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "My older sister went through something similar with our dad after our parents divorced," he said. "It took her years to stop feeling responsible for his financial problems. Family dynamics can be really complicated." His understanding, free from judgment, felt like a gift. As our relationship developed over the following months, I found myself experiencing what a healthy partnership could be: mutual support, respect for boundaries, shared joy, and growth. The contrast with my family relationships was stark and educational. About 4 months after my move, my mother escalated her efforts to regain control. She began telling extended family and family friends that I had cut her off completely, that I refused to speak to her, that I had abandoned my family in their time of need. The resulting concerned calls and messages were difficult to navigate. I found myself defending choices I knew were healthy and necessary, explaining complexities to people who had only heard one distorted side of the story. Dr. Winters helped me develop scripts for these interactions and reminded me that I didn't owe explanations to everyone who asked. "Your journey is yours," she emphasized. "Not everyone will understand or approve, and that's okay." I began to be more selective about which calls I returned and which relationships I invested energy in maintaining. Some family members, once presented with my perspective, recognized the manipulation at play and offered support. Others remained firmly in my mother's camp, convinced of my selfishness. I learned to accept this division as inevitable, rather than trying to win universal approval. As 6 months approached in my new life, I realized how much my perspective had shifted. The guilt that had initially been overwhelming had diminished to occasional twinges. The anxiety about my family's welfare had been replaced by a belief in their capacity to solve their own problems. The fear of being selfish had transformed into a recognition of healthy self-care. I was building a life that honoured both my responsibilities to myself and my connections to others, connections based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when doubt crept in, when my mother's voice in my head questioned my choices, but those voices grew quieter as my confidence in my new path strengthened. The woman who had driven away from her family home 6 months earlier, tears streaming down her face, uncertain of her identity outside of being the family provider, was becoming someone new, someone stronger, clearer about her boundaries, more authentic in her relationships, and more at peace with herself. The price of this transformation had been high: strained family relationships, painful confrontations, judgment from others. But as I sat on my apartment's rooftop terrace one evening, watching the sunset over the Boston skyline, I knew with certainty that it had been worth it. The life I was building might have been born from pain and betrayal, but it was blossoming into something beautiful and authentically mine. 6 months into my independent life, I celebrated with a small dinner party in my apartment. Around my table sat the people who had supported me through this transition: Taylor, my friend who had offered her guest room without hesitation; Dr. Winters, who had become more mentor than therapist; Michael, whose steady presence had become an anchor in my life; and surprisingly, Megan, the only family member with whom I had maintained regular contact. As we shared wine and conversation, I looked around at these faces and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was a different kind of family, one built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care, rather than obligation and financial dependence. The realization brought unexpected tears to my eyes. To new beginnings, I proposed, raising my glass, and to all of you who helped make them possible. Financial freedom had created space for personal growth I hadn't anticipated. Without the crushing burden of supporting my family, I had resources, both financial and emotional, to invest in. Myself, I had started taking courses toward an MBA, something I had always wanted, but had dismissed as impractical given my previous financial obligations. I had joined a financial literacy volunteer program, helping low-income individuals navigate budgeting, debt management, and saving strategies. This volunteer work became unexpectedly healing. Using my professional skills to empower others rather than enable dependency gave me a sense of purpose and contribution that was healthier than my previous family role. Seeing clients gain confidence in their financial decisions reminded me of my own journey toward financial autonomy. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of my healing process. With Dr. Winter's guidance, I explored the roots of my excessive responsibility-taking, tracing it back beyond my father's death to early childhood patterns where my achievements and reliability had been disproportionately praised and reinforced. You learned early that your value was tied to what you could provide for others, Dr. Winters observed. That's a heavy burden for a child to carry, and it followed you into adulthood. Working through these insights wasn't easy. There were sessions where I left emotionally exhausted, raw from confronting deeply embedded beliefs about my worth and role in relationships. But gradually, I began to separate my identity from my utility to others, to recognize my inherent value beyond what I could provide financially or practically. My relationship with my extended family evolved in unexpected ways. My mother, realizing that her direct manipulations were no longer effective, had embarked on a campaign of misinformation, telling relatives and family friends that I had cut her off completely and refused any contact. This led to uncomfortable confrontations with aunts, uncles, and cousins who had heard only her version of events. Initially, I tried to explain the full situation to everyone who approached me, determined to correct the record. But this proved exhausting and often futile, as many had already formed their opinions based on my mother's narrative. Eventually, I adopted a simpler approach. I love my family, but we needed to establish healthier boundaries. I'm still working through what that looks like. Those who were genuinely concerned about family harmony, rather than taking sides, seemed satisfied with this response. Those who insisted I was wrong to prioritize my own financial well-being gradually dropped away from my life, a natural filtering process that, while painful, left me with relationships that were more authentic and supportive. About 7 months after my move, Megan graduated with her master's degree. I attended the ceremony, sitting separate from my mother and Ryan, and Tam, arrangement that felt symbolic of our new family dynamic. Afterward, during the reception, Megan surprised me by introducing me to her professors and friends as my sister, the financial analyst who inspired me to be independent. That evening, over dinner to celebrate her achievement, Megan shared something that shocked me. "Mum's been telling people you refused to help with my education," she said, stirring her pasta absently. "I corrected her in front of Aunt Susan last week. Told her you had actually paid far more than you should have for years, and that I was managing fine on my own now. She didn't speak to me for 3 days. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle," I said, feeling guilty that my actions had created tension between Megan and our mother. "Don't be," Megan replied firmly. "It's actually been good for me to see the dynamics more clearly. I'm learning to stand up for myself too, and—" She hesitated. "I've started therapy." Her admission filled me with hope, not just for Megan, but for the possibility that cycles of financial dependency and emotional manipulation could be broken in our family, even if only partially and gradually. Ryan's journey took a different path. After losing his truck to repossession when he couldn't make the payments, he experienced what appeared to be a wake-up call. Through Megan, I heard he had taken a full-time position at a construction company and moved into a small apartment with roommates, his first independent living situation at 32. We weren't in direct contact, but I felt cautiously optimistic about these changes. My mother remained the most resistant to the new family dynamic. Her communications, when they occurred, continued to revolve around financial needs and subtle guilt trips. I maintained firm boundaries while keeping the door open for a relationship that wasn't based on my financial support. "I'm happy to have Sunday dinner once a month," I told her during a rare phone conversation. "I'd love to hear about your book club and your friends, but I won't be discussing financial matters or accepting guilt for my decision to live independently." She was silent for a long moment before responding. "I don't know how to have that kind of relationship with you, Abigail." Her honesty, perhaps unintentional, was revealing. Our relationship had been so defined by financial dependency that she couldn't envision one without it. The realization was sad but clarifying. "Maybe we can learn together," I suggested, though I wasn't sure she was willing to try. 10 months into my independent life, I received a promotion at work to senior portfolio manager, a position that came with a significant salary increase and greater responsibilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that without family financial drains, I didn't actually need the additional income. Instead of going toward mortgage payments for a house I didn't live in, or car loans for vehicles I didn't drive, my new salary increase went directly into investments for my future. For the first time, I was building wealth rather than merely generating income that flowed outward to others. The sense of security this created was profound, healing some of the financial anxiety that had been instilled during the difficult years after my father's death. Around this time, Taylor convinced me to join her on a vacation to Costa Rica, my first real vacation in years. In the past, family obligations and financial constraints had limited my travels to brief weekend trips or family events that rarely felt restful. This 2-week adventure, with its beaches, rainforests, and complete absence of family drama, was transformative. "You're different here," Taylor observed as we watched the sunset from a beachfront restaurant. "More relaxed, more present." She was right. Away from the lingering tensions of family expectations, I felt lighter, more authentic. I returned from that trip with a renewed commitment to creating space in my life for joy and adventure rather than mere obligation and responsibility. As the 1-year anniversary of my move approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The financial statistics were striking. I had gone from spending over $9,000 monthly on family expenses to creating a balanced budget that allowed for both current enjoyment and future security. I had transitioned from enabling dependency to fostering independence, both for myself and, indirectly, for my siblings. But the emotional transformation was even more significant. The constant knot of anxiety in my chest had dissolved. The reflexive guilt when I spent money on myself had faded. The habit of placing everyone else's needs above my own had been replaced by a healthier balance of self-care and genuine, freely chosen generosity. I wasn't perfect at these new patterns. There were still moments when old habits surfaced, when my mother's voice in my head questioned my right to prioritize myself, when guilt about my relative financial comfort compared to my family's struggles crept in. But these moments became less frequent and less powerful as my new patterns of thinking solidified. On the exact anniversary of my departure from the family home, I received an unexpected email from my mother. I opened it with trepidation, expecting recriminations or financial requests. Instead, I found something utterly surprising. "Abigail, I've been doing a lot of thinking over this past year. While I still don't fully understand or agree with your decisions, I can see that you're doing well on your own. The house seems empty without you, but perhaps it was time for all of us to learn to stand on our own feet. If you're willing, I'd like to try having a relationship that isn't about money. Maybe we could meet for lunch sometime. Mum." I read the message multiple times, trying to detect hidden manipulation or ulterior motives. It seemed genuinely, if tentatively, conciliatory. After discussing it with Dr. Winters, I decided to respond positively but cautiously, suggesting lunch at a neutral restaurant halfway between our homes. That lunch was awkward, with long silences and careful navigation around sensitive topics, but it was also the first interaction with my mother in years that didn't involve financial expectations or obligations. A small step, perhaps, but a meaningful one. As I drive home afterward, I reflected on the profound life lessons of the past. True family supports your growth rather than exploiting your success. Financial boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for healthy relationships. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It often makes you a healthier one. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who take advantage of you the most, and recognizing this isn't disloyalty, it's clarity. The path to genuine generosity begins with securing your own oxygen mask first. The price of freedom, financial, emotional, psychological, can be high, but it's worth every penny. My journey from financial exploitation to empowerment wasn't complete. Relationships continued to evolve, boundaries required ongoing maintenance, and old patterns occasionally resurfaced. But I had discovered a fundamental truth that would guide me going forward. Love without respect isn't really love at all, and family ties should lift you up, not drain you dry. If you've ever found yourself financially supporting family members beyond your means or comfort, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for both your well-being and ultimately theirs. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision for your own financial health? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, true family supports your dreams rather than exploiting your success. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create the life you deserve.